Welcome to our 17th week of Master Coaches Weekly Buzz, hosted by our colleague John Foreman. We continue to update our viewers on the most current issues and trends during our conversations with leaders in our sport. Our most recent interviews with both the Pac-12 NCAA National Championship Team head coach and the Pac-12 Coach of the Year provided us great insight into Pac-12 volleyball. Newsflash. Tomorrow, the JVA and club directors will be having an open discussion with the sports director of the National Federation of State High School Coaches on how club and high school can adapt to this season's changes. Want to stay on top of these conversations? Go to jvavolleyball.org and sign up for Dig These Tips. Our Journey of the Legend series, our viewers heard from our master coaches who have had over 160 years of experience. My, boys. Brian Gimolero, former head coach at Long Beach State, only coach to win a high school, a club, a college national championship. Barbara Tucci, who is currently men's head coach at Sacred Heart University, but has coached women's volleyball at Tennessee, West Point, Rutgers, Temple, and Lehigh, and we will soon be doing a coach's portal for him. And finally, Mick Haley, former USC head coach, has a national championship junior college at AIW and NCAA. All will be asking our guests the tough questions on Big Ten and SEC volleyball. And what does volleyball at the collegiate level look like moving forward? First, let's go to former Olympic coach Mick Haley, who will introduce our guest today. Mick?
Ruth, you're getting better and better and better. My goodness. It really is my pleasure to introduce two of the most successful coaches in collegiate volleyball that we've ever had. Mary Wise has had 958 wins in her career, 877 of them at Florida and 30 seasons at Florida. And she's been to 8 Final Four appearances, which is pretty outrageously good. Russ Rose starting his 42nd season. Russ, you have to be older than me. At Penn State with 7 national championships, 1,299 wins. You're not going to get that 13th win because they're not going to let you play. So combined, these two championship coaches have 2,258 wins between them and have played 72 seasons. My goodness gracious. Welcome to the show, you guys.
Thank you.
I'm going to start this off pretty quick and move right in. And, you know, my question to you was, are we going to have a championship? And I'd like to say a few things before I let you talk about that. But we seem to have 6 conferences who are willing to play this fall, 3 in Power Fives. All other conferences have either postponed or canceled their seasons for this year, and those who have postponed seem to be hoping for a meaningful spring championship. We know the NCAA is committed to a men's and women's basketball championship because of the television money there, and it just puts our most popular women's sport in a very, very uncomfortable position in this country, which is women's volleyball. Coaches, are we going to play, and will we have a championship this year? And Mary, since you're in a conference that wants to play this fall, I'd like to see you start and talk a little bit about what you think is going on. And really, are you folks that are trying to play this fall kind of being held hostage by football wanting to get going this fall?
Boy, there's a softball question if I've ever gotten one.
That's why Russ told me to have you start. No, you didn't really.
And whatever I answer could all change in the next half hour. That much.
That's right.
What I know of today is that the SEC, with some other conferences, are still trying to create a template for us to be able to compete in the fall. But I will tell you that I am reticent to put our athletes on the court at any time, whether it's fall or spring, without a chance to play in the championship if it costs them a year of eligibility. So I think I think we're doing a lot of really good things on everyone's campuses to keep our athletes healthy and safe. But how this is going to look when everyone's schools return, those are the million-dollar questions. So as of today, we don't have a schedule. We don't know who we play. We don't know how long the schedule. As of today, what that would look, fall or spring. So you know what we're doing? We're just trying to get better in the gym.
Russ, how do you approach that? Since the Big Ten has said that they've postponed their season, and Mary, I'd like to come back to you after Russ answers. Really, if you play in the fall, would you then miss out on a chance for a championship? But Russ, why don't you talk about your situation in the Big Ten?
Well, I mean, first off, it's great to be here with all of you, and I agree with what Mary was identifying as the challenge with the players and their eligibility, and other than Brian, who built a great program at a school without the benefit of the football dollars that all of us have really been able to benefit from. That's the big challenge. I know, all of us that coach the other sports, we want to think we're at the top of the conversation, and we might be in a conversation, but we're not in that conversation. So I know as far as the Big Ten is concerned, we have lots of conversations as coaches, and even when we thought we were going to play in the fall, we always had spring as an option. But I agree with Mary's position, and I think unless we could have a 64-team tournament in the spring that reflects the quality of the teams that are playing in this country, I think it's going to be a real challenge, and it's also going to be a challenge for those 6 conferences that are hoping to play in the fall, how they might be able to try and play in the fall and then play in the spring, because there might be some NCAA ramifications of if all of us are being asked to play our fall like the traditional spring season, how is that going to play itself out? So there's a lot of unanswered questions. It just so happens that a couple of conferences decided early that they didn't think that they could offer sports during the fall, and those people are taking a lot of heat for making that early decision when the other Power 5 conferences are still looking at things.
Mary, did you have an opinion? If you played in the fall and they had a championship, would you think there'd be a fall championship, even though NC2A has said not? And if not, could you play a fall schedule and then play in the spring also?
Well, that's one of the things that's on the table being discussed. And they're calling it a hybrid, but I have no idea. We have no parameters. We have no idea what the hybrid means. They're just calling it a hybrid. And I've asked, how is it possible that we would be able to play both the fall and the spring? You asked me, would our players want to play in the fall without a championship? That answer is no. Not a chance. They would, and I think you would see a lot of players opt out of playing. I think that's the reality of it. And so what we're holding out for is to find out what does a hybrid mean. And if, as Russ mentioned earlier, if it was reversing, flipping the seasons, so we had four dates like we usually have in the spring. We had 4 in the fall, and I've thought if we need like practice runs for basketball, indoor sports, competing, let's use our 4, but don't cost our players a year of eligibility. This is what we know. Yes, it's still up in the air whether there's going to be an NCAA championship in the spring, but the only thing we know for certain is there's no championship in the fall.
So, Bob, you got an idea.
Yeah,
Why don't you jump in here?
Yeah, I'll start with Russ in this. Mary, I'd like you to weigh in as soon as he answers. But we know, like you just mentioned, we know that there's not going to be an NCAA championship in the fall. So I think we really need to find some solutions, all right, to protect our sport, all right, because if it's going to be a championship in the spring, right now through some of the contacts we've talked to, the NCAA can't run all the necessary championships for all the sports in the spring. So one possible solution that I've thought of would be, how do you feel about running a men's and women's championship at the same time in the spring? That way, the NCAA only has to staff and run, in essence, one big championship.
Well, I mean, the difference being, you guys have a 6-team event that comes together, and we start with a 64-team event. So if we could still have some sort of 2 or 3 weekends where instead of having 16 first-round weekends where we have 4 teams, maybe we have 8 locations where we have 6 teams or 8 teams, and we work it out of that and pare it down and get together. I think that would be great for volleyball if we could find a location that has the facilities that could host it. I think it's great. A number of us, certainly, you, Mick, and I have come from men's volleyball in our pasts as well. Having coached both men and women. So, I'm a big advocate for the men's game. So, my thought would be, if it's possible, I know a lot of schools, in our case, it's a challenge to say we share a facility in the spring if we play in the spring with men's volleyball, men's wrestling, which is a very big sport here, men's and women's gymnastics that has to use that facility. So now we have 5 teams using that one facility. That's a different challenge. It could happen. There's seven nights a week, and there's a lot of different time slots. So I think it's possible. But, the NCAA was real clear in saying they're committed to the spring sports that lost their championships first. And we were in the conversation. And, when somebody just say, when you're in the conversation, I've lost a lot of recruits to Mary. So I know how it is when you're in the conversation. So, I think there's a big difference to when somebody says, hey, we got to take care of football and men's and women's basketball and the rest of your fall sports. We're gonna try and take care of you.
Mary, how do you feel about it?
And I think Russ put his finger on it. The piece that we all got anxious over when we heard that we're going to take care of the winter spring championships first, and then maybe the fall. But Bob, to your idea, it'd be a great marketing. I can't imagine. It'd be a phenomenal way to market our sport. I think it would be good for both the men and the women. The reality is, it's going to be about budgets. Every school is taking such a hit, and so I agree. I hate to shortchange, because this is the message I keep saying is, you guys, I'm looking at everyone who's had such a phenomenal career, and we've been so blessed in the sport to coach for decades, but our athletes, they get 4 years total, and we're talking about a quarter of their experience. And anything less than Russ described, the 64 team, we shortchange our athletes. And I get it. We'll have to understand do we want to play? Yes. We want to compete for a championship? Yes. But it won't look like what we've been blessed with, that you all helped build into something special. And so I think we just make it as meaningful experience as possible, but knowing that it's probably going to have to look different.
Brian knows, he was at, there's not a lot of schools that have won both men and women's national championships. And, Long Beach is another one of those universities that's done that. And it's, it's great when a school embraces both sports. And, Tennessee and LSU and Texas and Florida had men's volleyball. Men's volleyball in this country would be even better, and yet already we're able to compete for gold medals every 4 years. So, the sport itself on the men's side is doing great. But if those major universities really embraced it, it would be that much better.
Mary and Russ, it's nice to see both of you. I haven't seen either one of you in a while. Thanks for doing this. My interest kind of interesting to me is what is going on in practice and what do you hear about it? You touched on it about the idea that is this a traditional part of the season? For our viewers, traditional means you have a longer practice period of time allowed by the NCAA, or is it a non-traditional time where the hours are less? Or are they going to penalize you if you practice full now and aren't allowed to practice as much in the spring if there's a championship? Is there any talk about that? How are we looking at that? And what do you hear from the conferences or the NCAA? Mary, can we start with you?
Yeah, I can say you listed a lot of questions, Brian, of which I don't know those answers. And it's like, that's like the nuts that we would love to know. So what we've done is, we had to readjust our thought in terms of the amount. Like normally when you guys would go into preseason and you're in sprint mode to get your teams ready to play that last weekend in August. Well, we figured that wasn't happening, and we're trying to manage the load because our players haven't been on the court together doing meaningful volleyball since March. So we made that adjustment, and to your question, what we try to do, control what we can control, and that is in our gym when we're practicing, it's different, with the masks and the things that we have to do, but it does feel normal again. I was so grateful when we got to be back in the gym because there was some semblance of normalcy. But in terms of how long can we do that? How many hours do we get? What happens if we aren't playing in the fall? Do we have to go back to 8 hours? Brian, I'd like to think somebody is thinking and discussing that, and maybe Russ has more insight than I do, but that I can just say it hasn't trickled down to this coach.
Well, Russ, we know Russ makes the decisions for the NCAA, but I'd like your opinion too, Russ.
Well, I'm on the quick dial for being written up more than I think the rest of you on this call. So, but I would say, our players were on campus for a month, and I was unable to see them since last March. So when we started practice, we started practicing, August 7th, like everyone else was allowed to practice. I was starting preseason, even though I kind of knew that it was going to get shut down at some point in time. I was running, just for the old traditionalists who know me, 3-a-days, even though I knew it was going to get shut down. So I did it just because. So after like 2.5 days, then they came in and had the meeting and said everything is being shut down for the fall, but you're allowed to practice. So we've readjusted everything, and as Mary said, we start classes on Monday. So I'm hoping by Monday that there's some NCAA interpretation, or Penn State will give me an interpretation about what we're allowed to do. But we'll just go with the NCAA rules that say what our limitations are once classes start, because that's when they start. So that's same thing.
Good. I wanted to throw one more thing out since we opened up. In your opinion, both of you, is there going to be a spring? Will we have a spring volleyball championship? Either one of you.
You have a magic.
Dive right in.
What do you think,
I
Diane?
want to make it easy for you too.
It's hard to say. It's hard to say because you have no idea to identify what's going to happen with the virus. Nobody has any idea what's going to happen with the vaccine. We get tested every week. all of our players and team get tested every week. So once classes start and things change, I have no idea. But, you know, that uncertainty with the NCAA, nobody knows. Your guess is as good as our guess. You were in this game for a long time. You're just sitting on the outside smiling.
Yeah, it is less painful, I'll tell you.
I mean, the good
Mary,
news
what do you think? What's your best guess?
Well, I think the one thing we do have going for us in this way is basketball. They want to, you mentioned it earlier, Mick, there's a real need to play basketball. And so figuring out how to do an indoor sport and that with testing and travel and fans and all. So if basketball doesn't go, then obviously volleyball is not going in the spring either. But if they can make protocol to play basketball, I think we have a chance. And I feel like if for our players, I don't know, Russ, you've been in more NCAA matches than anybody, but if the NCAA backed out and said, we're not going to host a championship, and maybe, I don't know, Triple Crown or some other entity stepped up and said, you know what, we can host it and we can do a really good job and we don't have to worry about some of those like annoying rules that you have to live with the NCAA, it may not be so bad. Our players want to play against the very best. That is the bottom line. They want to play the very best competition possible.
That'll be the choice. Do you want to play a 16-team tournament like in '85 when men's basketball went from 32 teams before they went to just taking conference champions to opening it up to saying, hey, would you rather go play the best teams in a non-sanctioned event where the school pays for it or your booster clubs pay for it, and at least it's a meaningful end-of-season event. We were all back in the day in those AIAW events where you'd play 5 or 6 matches, and that was always a fun experience.
Oh, yeah. Okay, now it's my turn, and I don't know why I end up getting to have the best question at the end. Usually I have to cut Mick off, sometimes Bob, and sometimes Brian. Recruiting. Okay, think of this. 7 months already, you're going to have a dead period if we go the end of September. Now, August 1, 2019 to July 31, 2020, there were 579 D1 players in the portal. Now, a lot of those recruits are out there, and it's like, I think you guys are going to find out who's really flexible, the players or the coaches, because it seems like Mary, like Russ, you said, hey, we don't know day to day, but what do you see about the players you have that want to, that you are saying, yes, you might play, yes, you might use your eligibility, yes, we might pay for your 5th year, no, we're not going to do this. How do you even begin that conversation with your team and the potential recruits you have? Mary, I'm going to go at you.
I can tell you, Ruth, you have just knit. What keeps me awake at night is exactly that. And what happens to roster management if we don't have a meaningful season, players opt out, they like a red shirt for a year. What does that mean to your classes going further? I don't have a sense they're going to add more scholarships, but again, because that's cost. And so it's not like, well, they did it with the spring sports, that got cut short, but will they do it for us? I think what does that mean for players in the class of 22 and 21 who have already committed, thinking through attrition, those scholarships will be available? That is the unknown that just, like I said, keeps me awake at night.
So really just to say, to be flexible, if you're one of those recruits out there, and the fact is you guys are having to be flexible, and it's being optimistic, correct? And saying, look, we're going to do the best we can and give you the most up-to-date information.
For sure, because like always, communication is the best way to go about it. And the parents, from whether it's the class of 21 or beyond, the parents are paying attention. They understand that there's so many unknowns. But who's ever, the dead period, who knows when the dead period will come up? Russ, do you have any feeling like that they're going to end the dead period at the end of September?
I mean, I don't, when you look at some of the schools that have already started classes and then shut down, obviously they're not bringing people on campus either way. I talked to some people. We start classes on Monday, and there's people who I talk to in sports information who told me they won't be back in their office till January. So, I think it's going to be a challenge. And, again, it was up to the individual schools if they wanted to give people additional scholarships who lost their eligibility years last year. And, our school elected to do that, but there were some schools in the Big Ten who elected to not give those returning kids a fifth year or a sixth year, depending on the sport they played. Wrestling's kind of a strange sport where kids seem to have, more than the normal 5 or 6 or 7 years of lives. So, football is such a different animal. The numbers are so large and the rosters are so large. If they're going to extend that out for football, that number is going to be astronomical, and it's really going to fly over. There's only 6 sports that are head count sports. So how it impacts the head count sports is so totally different than some of the equivalency sports. But how it's going to impact, women's volleyball, I think, is something that we'll just have to wait and see. But, I agree with Mary that it's communicating with the players that you have right now, communicating with the players that, are coming in, and maybe communicating with future players that, you might be interested, but your hands might be tied if the school says you have to honor a previous scholarship offer that it's in place right now.
Well, I'm going to say this, Mary and Russ, you look pretty darn good if you're not sleeping any at all. Now, I know Mick is ready because he's got closing out, but he always has one more question, and that question usually goes for quite a few minutes. Okay, Mick.
Well, I've been listening to this not only from you guys, but a bunch of other people, and it seems to me that there's not a solution here. Because there are so many different things at stake. The smaller schools' athletic directors do not want to pay a fifth year, and they want to have a season so that they can have a season that's good enough for the athletes so they graduate and they move on. The coaches see an opportunity to maybe train and play a little bit, but have their teams back for another year, and they're looking at that as a chance to get a lot better. The recruiting has got to be frustrating for them. The NCAA does not want to get sued, and they're not going to just say, well, the players want to play, so we're going to do that, because the players will change their mind the minute somebody gets sick, and they'll not want to play, and they'll go 180 degrees in a heartbeat. Somebody said, I think it was you, Bob, said they'll change as fast as the weather, and I think that's true. That's just the nature of the beast right now. So you've got all of these things, plus you've got the spring sports don't want to give up anything because they lost their spring sports last year, and they want full attention this year to have a championship. Bob's suggestion was the only suggestion I've heard that kind of mediates the thing where the NCAA wouldn't have to run another championship. But to have a championship now with the number of teams you guys are advocating, 64, the schools are going to have to pay for the first and second rounds. The NCAA is not going to pay for that. I think the best we're going to see is a 16-team proposal at the most. So do you accept that? Do you reject that? And if we don't get all the conferences on the same page and all play in the same semester, how is that going to happen? Anybody have any kind of last words on that?
You nailed it.
Okay, Mick.
Now all right.
Yeah, I think the reality of us not having a 64 team field, I think that's legit. What I hope, though, please let it not be 16. I also know, what is it? Is it 32 automatic bids that are out there? It's 32 different conferences, but they think some conferences may not even be fielding teams in the spring.
I think that's right. Yeah, I think that's right.
And so, maybe now in August we hold off. I truly hope it's not a 16 team field. But Mick, if that comes to pass, where if we want to expand the field, that schools would have to pay money towards that, then maybe we could carry that towards 21 in the future, and we can be less regionalized. Maybe something good could come out of this. Think about this. Follow me. But if we pay for our travel for those first and second rounds, maybe we could get away from the regionalization that we see in our sport and have for years.
The biggest problem for the schools when you do this is hosting at other sites, is the testing, the cost of testing at those places, the bubble situation that you have to have. Russ mentioned maybe 4 schools or 6 schools, something like that. But you've got those people there for 4 days or so, and you've got to keep them safe. You've got to test. You've got all of that expense. And that's why, as we talked about this in our Master Coaches group, we don't see how this is going to work unless you combine it with the championship somehow, and figure out maybe 2 places where 16 teams each go and play, and you come out with 2 from each of those places, and then those 2 go, or something like that. So people need to really put their heads to the grindstone and try to figure out what you can come up with that might work. I know our group has come up with a lot of ideas. I thought Bob's idea was really quite good, and so anyway, we'll leave it at that. There's one other thing that last week we started, and I think you guys will agree with us. We want to encourage all of the head coaches to get their assistant coaches and the high school coaches and the club coaches to make sure they renew their dues at the AVCA, because we need a strong leadership group to help us navigate through all of this. You guys want the AVCA leading, and they have inroads into the NC2A and the other groups like basketball and that sort of thing, that they can help us. So we're hoping that we can get everybody signed up. AVCA is projected to lose $1 million, and that's $1 million of support you coaches and schools need to have. So if we can do that, and Ruth is going to ask me to talk about next week here, and I'm very simply going to say, on August 21st, according to the executive director of the NC2A, we're supposed to have answers to all of these things. And our next Zoom session is the 22nd. So as soon as we know what the NC2A decides, we're going to go out and find 2 more experienced veterans like you two to come in and tell us what that really means. And we haven't heard yet from a couple of the conferences, so we'll be doing that. We've contacted some people so far. They're excited about coming on, but we're not going to tell you until we know exactly what the situation is, so we can try to look ahead at the big picture and do some additional work. So thank you back to you, Ruth, so you can finish up here.
All right. For those interested in hosting a Master Coaches virtual clinic this fall for your team or your coaches, or an in-person clinic in 2021, please go to our Instagram, VB Master Coaches, click on our bio, and click the link for virtual clinics, or you may scan our QR code that takes you directly to all of our information. Join us next week for our Master Coaches Weekly Buzz. Follow us on Facebook, Volleyball Master Coaches, Instagram or Twitter, VB Master Coaches. All of our weekly buzz shows are on YouTube, and you may access these by going directly to our Instagram account. Click the link in our bio and enjoy listening to leaders in our sport like Russ and Mary. Don't forget, if your teams are looking to be safe while training, utilizing a custom-fitted volleyball mask, please go directly to our Instagram account, click on the link in our bio, and complete the contact form, and a representative from the factory will call you directly. Now, let's go to our host, John Foreman, who will update us on his upcoming coaching conversations and an update on his weekend filled with watching junior volleyball and what his prospects for Medaille Mavericks might be. And a little reminder, John, order your custom-fitted Mavericks mask. All right, John.
All right, thanks, Ruth. Yeah, we'll get on that mask thing. I don't know when we're going to be using them. Actually, Friday was supposed to be the start of our preseason. Clearly, that's not happening. I'm waiting like everybody else to find out when we're going to be able to get in the gym and all that sort of stuff. So it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks. We've got kids in quarantine on campus who came from out of state because New York's got the limitations. As Bob knows, I had a coaching conversation today with a couple of guys from Volleyball League of America to talk about the men's pro league development from their perspective. So that'll be available to people. Definitely check that out. Other than that, as Mick said, we're expecting another good episode next week. So check us out on social media to keep updated on what we got coming up when we know. And other than that, thanks to Russ and Mary. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in. And we'll see you next time.
Mary, Russ, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Russ. Thanks, Mary.
Thanks, Russ. Thanks, Mary. Appreciate it.
Enjoyed it. Thanks, guys.